I see the issue that humanity is facing now in three tiers, in that there's a physical tier, there is a psychological tier, and then there's a spiritual tier. And I feel like it's kind of evolving now, or maybe it's already evolved from the physical to the psychological, or maybe it all exists all at once. But as people are now progressing and making self-realizations and kind of taking a stance, I think the warfare is becoming more eminent and more present. And so as of right now, I kind of see that we're battling on a physical level, like people are protesting and, the cops are out, and on a physical level, there's that, the discourse is happening. But I think there's also a new psychological aspect that's going to come to light next, in that my friend and I were talking about social media, and that now that people are out in the streets, like they're recording, and we have online news now where people are going to Twitter for their information as opposed to going to the news. I think there's a psychological aspect in that. It's like, even though information is now widely available, and it's all out for us to observe and take in, on a psychological level, we have still been conditioned to look to a certain group or a certain source for valid information. And it's not something that I think that we do deliberately. It's just kind of the way in which we operate. Because again, I think that the way this warfare has been happening on humanity has been on a very subconscious level. So it's good and it's relevant and a major step, I think, to approach the physical and the conscious level of it. But I think the next step needs to also pay attention to the psychological, and that, like, we need to start being very much deliberate about the media that we're exposing ourselves to, not only in regards to this topic, but the music we listen to, the shows that we watch. Like, really pay attention to what it is that all these media sources from all angles are putting into our minds and normalizing within our psyches, and subconsciously coercing us to think. Because I was talking to my friend this morning about how even in the midst of all of this, I've kind of had to take a step back from social media. And I was talking to my friend, she's like, yeah, I wish I could do that, but I just feel like I always have to, I need to know what's going on. I need to be like plugged in. And I was like, yeah, I think that's the trick, It's the trick, and it's not just in this scenario. Like, it's the need that we have now on a subconscious level to be online, or feel like that is where we always need to be interacting. And something I did last year is that, like, I observed my thought patterns when I was using social media casually. And then I quit social media for 3 days, and I observed my thought patterns then. And what I noticed more than anything is that when I wasn't using social media, I was having more independent thoughts. What I realized is that when we use social media, especially in the way that we do now, where you get up and the first thing you do is check your phone, it's like being on your phone sets the tone for the thoughts that occupy your head throughout the day, So without even realizing, you're thinking about what you saw on Twitter, or even if you're not thinking directly about it, when you scroll and what you see makes you feel a certain way, it gets into your mind, and that's the way you can, those are the feelings you act off of on a subconscious level throughout the rest of your day. And I think that's the impact that we don't really take time to really realize, and you won't notice it until you deliberately try to stop. When you try to delete your phone, then you start to realize how often you reach for your phone, and how kind of like out of it you feel when you don't have that constant source. You kind of realize that, wow, I depend on this so much, and I didn't realize how much I needed it until I stepped away from it. And in that way, I think that that's the kind of the psychological warfare that we need to take on next. There's even people who are saying, like, this is not the time to not be online, and I think this is. I don't know, because for me, I think, at least, and everybody has their own space, but for me, like, I have to not be online, because again, we're barraged with so much information, and we need to take the time to really process things. I don't think we process things as much anymore. We kind of act in the midst of our immediate reactions and emotions, and we don't take the time to step back and think and identify with who we are outside of how we feel in this current moment. And I say all that to say that, that's just what I was thinking about when I thought about, wow, like, I'm seeing things happen on a physical level, but the warfare, the real problem, I think, is so deeply rooted, and it goes so much deeper than just the physical. It goes so much deeper than just black men are being shot, or black people, I should say. Sandra Bland, black people are being killed. black cops, and there's so many aspects to it. So I'm only speaking on like the little that I know. I cannot claim to know much. I can't claim to know everything. I can't claim to have an answer, but I think it's kind of worth maybe discussing, because it's just the thoughts that I have in my head. So yeah, the tiers that I'm seeing to this warfare is what I call it. There's a physical warfare that's happening that everybody sees on the surface. Black people are being murdered by cops, and cops aren't being convicted. The institution of police in modern America is corrupt, and modern government doesn't care for the black populace. Physically, we see that every single day. It's real. But then you start to think about, like, you know, the psychological level to it. Like, when you go back to slavery, and people are like, well, why didn't the slaves, you know, get up and kill the slave owners? Like, we're not our ancestors. Like, we'll beat you up. And it's like, nah, like, you really consider that it wasn't just like these people didn't just take slaves from Africa and bring them over to America and say, hey, you're gonna work for us, and we're white and we're better than you. Like, no, like, these people are psychologically broken in so many different ways, and I'm sure other people could elaborate more than I can. But just the simple act of taking away your name and telling you don't have a history. When somebody doesn't have their own identity or a sense of their own identity, they can be more easily coerced into becoming what a larger hand wants them to be, you know? So if I don't know who I am, my influences will define for me who I am. And we face that every day, you know, on many levels. Like, so many of us, and even I, have existed only knowing myself in relation to the people I was around. So I was never really independently who I am. I didn't really have anything that I truly stood for on my own independently. Even the things that I stood for because the people I was around stood for it, and it was convenient and accessible, and I got information and all that. But I think that's kind of starting to dig into that iceberg, and you really realize that there's a psychological warfare on the world, and more distinctly within this context on black people, and that they stripped us of everything. They stripped us of our names, they stripped us of our history, told us we don't have a history, told us everything is gone, and now we have to find a new identity in America. We have to redefine ourselves, and for that reason, so many people think that black history starts with slavery. I mean, we know that we say that, yeah, we existed long before then, we talk about it, but we really don't dive into it. Really, we exist in the reality that our reality only started in slavery, and we're moving from there. And so when I think about that, it's just like, man, like, I really see how this is such a deeper problem, and I'm grateful, and it's beautiful to really see the changes being made on a physical level. But I don't know, man, it's just like, I don't know, the more I think about it, it's just like, wow, like, this was really deep, and we're really gonna have to, at least for me, I think it's important to take notice so that it affects the way in which we address this. Because, you know, I was talking to my friend, and he was saying, like, man, no, well, she was saying, like, man, I don't see how we're gonna get out of this, you know? And I was like, well, you know, I think it's, at the end of the day, like, the next major step is gonna come with the realization of self. And I was like, nah, that's corny, bro. Like, don't come in here with that spirituality, But nah, like, I really think that's the next step, you know, because when it comes to realization of self, by that I mean, when you discover your identity for yourself without needing your environment to convince you of who you are, it affects every aspect of your life. And I think when black people realize our identity beyond the story that's been told to us, when you realize that our identity goes so far beyond slavery, beyond who we are in America, then we start to really dive into that and really, like, find our foundation outside of the story that's been told to us. And I think when we really discover that, it changes who you are. It's like, yeah, we're convincing people that we matter. We're saying Black Lives Matter, and it's valid, and it needs to be said. But at the same time, it's like, let's also embody that. It's like, I'm going to walk this earth as if I matter, you know? And that sounds kind of like off-putting. I feel like whenever people say stuff like that, it's kind of like to disregard the movement, and I really hope that's not what I want to kind of get across at all. What I'm saying is that, like, when you really have an understanding within yourself that you matter, it's not that I matter so you know, it's I matter because I matter, and I know that, and for that reason, it changes the way in which I approach this world. It changes where I spend my money. It changes the media I consume. It changes the media I put out. It changes the information, the circles I keep myself in, the conversations that I have. It changes the level of those, you know. And I think that if we make those individual realizations of self as a collective, it brings us up in that, like, the conversations we're having are on a different level, you know. The things that we invest our money into, different level, you know. The media that we put out, like, we're so creative. We are the leaders of the social world. Like, we control what is in the media. Culture operates off of us. So when we start to say, like, no, like, these are the things I'm going to discuss, and it's not just a category. It's not just like, oh, this is conscious music or this is woke music. It's like, no, this is the way in which we exist, because we acknowledge our reality, and this is what we want to pass down to our children. This is the kind of information we want our culture to take in, so that we continue to breed the realization of self within ourselves. I think that on an individual level has a collective, like, impact, and I think that's when the psychological warfare, that's when we're going to start to really battle the psychological warfare, and that's going to be a whole other level. And then the third aspect, I think, from there, with that realization of self, and I was talking to my friend and he disagreed, so maybe this is up for conversation as well. But I believe that with that realization of self will eventually, that realization of self, I believe, will eventually breed the realization of our divinity. And when I say divinity, I mean our relationship with God, because that is what I think is at the top tier. And I think that's what our opposers want to keep us from realizing, and that's why there's such a heavy emphasis on, like, oh, God is just in this one box, and God is white Jesus, and God is Christianity, and so it actually averts us away from the very thing that exists deeply within us, the very source of us, you know. We're averted from by the culture, and I kind of see, like, it's also very deliberate, and that's why I said this exists on many levels, and that the people who don't want us to realize who we are also don't want us to realize our relationship with God, because, you know, these people want to be God. They want to rule the world. They want to become God. They want to be in God's place and have control of the people and create the world for themselves. But I realized that the real world isn't really a real thing, or I don't know if the real world is a real thing, or rather, I see that the powers that be, it's like 5 people at the top have created an idea of what life is. And oh nah, maybe I shouldn't dive into that, because it's not I haven't really completed that thought. So I'll get back to you on that idea. But yeah, I think the spirituality aspect is something I'm still trying to figure out, because I think that's a process, that's a place I'm at in my life where I'm venturing into this part now, and I'm still figuring it out. So I don't think I have enough information to really say any founded facts or have an elaborated conversation on it. But I do realize that I think is a third tier of this entire situation, and in that that's the way I'm kind of seeing this whole situation, from the bigger picture in the 3 different levels that exist. And maybe in a couple months, I mean, I'm learning every day, so I might find out something new, find out something different, find out something I said may have been wrong or misinformed. But I think it's important to document this process, or at least where I am right now, to document my thoughts and the ideas that are in my head. And, you know, like I said, I'm not here to assert myself as if I know any more than any other man. I'm only sharing the realizations I've made along my life path and my life story, and maybe just opening them for discussion, and maybe just, you know, inspiring some thoughts in your mind for you to think about for yourself too.